Hey YouTube, AJ here, and this video, well, let's be honest, this video is kind of a mess. It started out to be one thing and ended up being something completely different because of the trials and tribulations along the way. My original goal was to have my frame as a roller, and that hasn't happened. So let's find out what went wrong along the way. As I was planning to get this frame into a roller, I started out by rounding off the ends of all my spring leaves and chamfering the ends so they wouldn't dig into one another. I wanted to get this done so I could assemble my spring leaf packs and then attach them to the axles and frame. Okay, so I got my spring leaves all laid out here, getting ready to coat them with slip plate. It's a dry film graphite lubricant that goes on like paint. Works really good between leaves to keep them sliding. One thing you do have to do is stir this up really good. Not shake it, stir it really good to get all the graphite re-entrained into the fluid before you paint it. So that's what we're going to do next. Alright, so you can see how chunky this is in the bottom. And if you get a spot where it breaks apart, you can see how dry it is. I can't find you a dry spot in the middle, but yeah, it's going to take a while to stir this in. There it is, see it? See if you can see that. See how dry that is? So you got to get that all stirred in there really good. Okay, so you can see I've got one side of every leaf now coated with the slip plate. Now this stuff is kind of expensive, but it goes a long way. 1 quart is going to be way enough to do both of my spring packs. And I've got one side done now, and I will take and flip these over after they're dry and do the other sides that are going to be in contact. So basically you want any surfaces that are going to be sliding back and forth on one another to be coated with this stuff. So obviously the very bottom of the very bottom leaf and the very top of the very top leaf don't really need it. Once my spring packs are completely assembled, I will be painting them black just to make them look a little better. I'll do that with them assembled, and that won't affect the slip plate itself. You don't want to paint your leaf surfaces because then they kind of glue themselves together and they don't slide very well. And the whole idea is if you want your suspension to work, you want these leaves to be able to slide back and forth on top of one another as it goes up and down. You don't want them digging into one another. And that's what allows the suspension to travel. You may have noticed as I was going along, I kept stirring my can to keep the graphite entrained in my fluid. So that's kind of one thing you want to pay attention to. They do make this product in a spray-on version, but all the reviews I read of that said that the cans would clog up and there was no way they could get them to work again, and like half to 3/4 of your material was stuck in the can, useless. So I went ahead and bought the quart, did it this way, brushed it on. It's pretty easy to use so far. We're going to let this dry for about a day, flip these over, do the other sides that are going to be in contact, and then from there we'll start assembling spring packs. We can assemble the front one off the car, but we'll have to assemble the rear one once we get it on the axle. One thing you may have noticed is the way I got these laid out here. Some are upside down, some are right side up in their working orientation. I just did that so I can keep track of my spring pack, how I'm building it. I am going to use this full leaf under my main leaf, and then these stack on top of my main leaf. That's just to give me a little more strength in the rear without raising the car up. Same thing on the front. I'm going to be using these two here as spacers under the main leaf and add more strength, again without raising the height of the car because it's going to be on the bottom side. So yeah, after these dry, I'll flip them, paint them, and then we'll come back and start assembling these. Okay, so I got the front spring pack loosely assembled here. If my measurements are correct, I am going to need some spacers on the bottom of my spring pack. My spring pack is essentially 8 leaves from the main up to the top one. And then I added these 2 leaves at the bottom as spacers. I know a lot of people cut these down, but my thinking is my spring pack may be kind of tired and may need this assistance of these 2 leaves. So I put a longer leaf underneath the main and then another full leaf that's a little bit shorter than that one under it, thinking that'll give me my spacer and maybe give me a little more support for the V8 engine in the frame. I don't know if that's right or not. I'm just kind of speculating at this point. If I feel later I need to take one or both of those out, I can still do that. I am not going to cut my spring bolt until I figure out my ride height and all that. I don't think there's any harm in assembling it as is for now. In fact, I think I'll be able to take it apart on the car if I have to. Anyway, so that's where we're at. To tighten this the rest of the way up, I'm just going to use C-clamps, put them kind of equal distance on both sides, and then I'm just going to tighten these up evenly until the spring pack is completely compressed. Then I'll tighten up the spring bolt. Okay, so there it is all tightened up. Now, I got a problem with my bottom 2 support leaves. There is a gap here that I don't like, so I probably will need to come back later and cut those down. I'm not sure yet, we'll see. I will go ahead and use a spring like this to mock it up, and then once I get all the weight onto the chassis, the engine, the body, all that, I'll see what this looks like at that point, and I'll make a decision on whether I need to cut these down, remove them completely, whatever. We'll deal with it then. Yeah, we're ready to move on to the back end. Can't assemble the back end spring like this because you have to put it under tension to get it attached to the rear axle. So to do that, I'm just going to be using the main leaf by itself on the rear axle to assemble it, and then I'll build the spring pack with it on the axle itself. But before we can do that, we got to get back to that axle and get it ready to mount this leaf. So the first thing we're going to do to start prepping this axle for my spring, I'm going to cut off these spring perches for the parallel leaf springs. So I'm going to cut these off, grind them down. Okay, so I've cut off the 2 spring perches from there and there. Now obviously I've got to do a lot of grinding to get these down smooth the way I want them. I'm not going to make you watch that though, I'll do that on my own. I'll come back to you when I'm ready to pull these drums. Yeah, so I got the pads all gone off of the axle, grinded down. I did try to keep the casting line going continuously down the axle. So before I go any further, I think what I'm going to do is remove these brake lines, drag this thing out in the yard, clean it up, shoot some rust reformer on it, get it at least nice looking and clean to handle, play with before I pop the drums off. Alright, so I cleaned up my rear radius rods and my center section of my diff and painted them, just because, you know, sometimes the guy's got to do something to make himself feel pretty, and having nice shiny black parts to work with, not getting my hands as dirty, you know, I like that. I know I'm putting the cart before the horse, as my father would tell me, but you know what, I do understand that I will probably have to remove some paint somewhere here along the way, especially on the radius rods, when I start cutting them to get them all to fit and all that, whatever, you know, we'll deal with that point when it comes. But for now, at least I don't have to get as dirty. We're at the point now where we're going to try to pull off these drums and hubs, because we need to get the axle to where we can mount these radius rods. And these bolts that currently mount these drums aren't long enough to mount my radius rods or my spring hangers. So we have to take everything off so we can replace these bolts with longer bolts. And I must admit, I don't know if I know what I'm doing here. First, we have this cotter pin and this nut that we need to remove. There we go. Anybody want to buy a slightly used 1946 cotter pin? I know this isn't the proper tool, but you know what, it's handy. We'll see if I can get it loose. Oh yeah, nice. Well, that's nice at least. That was a pipe dream. Wouldn't it have been nice if that would have just slid off there? Now, from what I understand, they make a special tool to pull these. I don't have that special tool. It's supposed to go around this shoulder here and press on this bolt to pull it out. And from what I've also understand, you can ruin the hub / drum by trying to pull these other methods. I have done that before with different types of axles, not necessarily the old Ford one, but however, I know that you are supposed to try to pull these evenly off and apply even pressure. Therefore, I have made myself a tool to use with my 3-jaw puller. And that tool is a used brake rotor off my Jeep. I did have to enlarge these holes. I had to make them more oval so they fit this bolt pattern. So that seems to be seated down really well on the hub there. We have a consistent gap back here. So what we're going to do now is put our nut back on here, because I've had these things, when you start applying pressure with the puller, I've had these hubs like come shooting off. That was on an old 1946 Jeep, but I don't want that to happen, so you put the nut on there so it can catch it once you start applying pressure. You can also just put it on past the threads, kind of use it to keep from messing up the threads. Let's see how this fits. These things are so much fun to use by yourself. It's got a long way to go. I could turn the arms around, but why? Oh, wait a minute. Ah, that's why it's not square. Well, one important thing is, when you're using these, is you need to be in the same bolt holes all the way around. And as you can see, this one is not the same as this one. Alright, so this one's odd man out. It needs to be in the top one. That's why it wouldn't line up square. Say what you want about Harbor Freight, but you know what? Some of their tools aren't that bad. I have been using these pullers for a long time. That's moving. Hey, look at that. By hand pressure. That's nice. It was already moving by hand. We are already at the point where we need to start backing off our nut. Okay, so I'm going to have to... Oh, it's sucking back in. That's weird. I'm going to have to remove my nut. Alrighty. Let's see what happens. Let's not stand in front of it. This part always scares the hell out of me. Sometimes they let go with a bang. You can also use some shock therapy. It's probably catching on the brake pads. Let's use a dead blow. These actuators don't want to turn much. I don't know if I'd make it worse or better. Well, that one turned off. The brake drum was turning before I started this, so I assumed it was clear of the shoes, but it could just still be catching. Let's try a little further here.
It's still moving.
Let's see what we see in here. Yeah, it's definitely the shoes catching. I can see them. We can't do a little manual release here. I found that it was dragging more on this side, it appears. And I went to this adjuster and I played with it a little bit, and I seem to be getting more motion out of it now, so let's give her another try. We're still getting much more gap on this side than this side, but it is a little better. It seems to be moving. I'm afraid this thing's going to go off with a kabang when those shoes finally let loose. Where's the kaboom? There's supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom. There it was. Oh shit. Something went. That sounded like something broke. Oh well. Probably gonna have to do all new spring hardware anyway. Kinda makes sense. Does seem to be coming off. I can still see shoes dragging in there. It's getting close to letting go. I can see the shoes are all cocked in there. Don't want it to mess up my wheel cylinder though. I mean, the hub itself is loose. We're just caught on these damn shoes. I'm probably overthinking this, trying not to damage stuff. Somebody's probably out there laughing at me. He's like, just put some pressure to it and let it rip the shoes right off. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the ultimate way to do it. Let's put some tension back on this again. Trying also, I don't want to screw up my backing plate. Don't want to bend it. a messed up wire brush now. I think we're moving. You can tell when I'm getting tired of messing with something. There she goes. Alright. So my shoes, at least on this side, the shoes snap back down. So it's going to go now one way or the other. This shoe is still up. I need some more tension on that. Alright. Let's roll this thing over. If I can do it without dropping it off my jack stand again. Alright, let's see if we can do the same thing on this side. Whoa! Yahtzee, we're there. Whee! There we go. This clip came loose. Imagine that, my brake shoes are rusty. There's actually a lot of pad on them though. Brakes don't look as bad as I thought they were going to. That's alright, Mama. There's one. I feel like something's rattling in there, but I can't find it. There's two. Okay. These are the short ones we got to take out. Notice they have small square heads. That's going to be an issue because the bolts I have to replace, the longer ones, do not have these small square heads. So we're going to have to be doing some modification there. But that's alright, we'll get there. Hopefully you got a picture of which way this was oriented because I don't remember. I'll have to make a note of it on the other side. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. Grease shield, splash shield, whatever, I don't know what that's called, something like that. Got the nut, this washer. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and put that back on there. This nut. So we'll leave that on there. Try to reduce the pain when I eventually shove it into my shin. And then we have this clip, which I have no idea where it goes on there. Oh, it probably goes, I know where it goes, because there's one here on this side. So it goes in that. So there must be one that goes on this side. Alright, cool. So now, this should all come off. Should, woulda, coulda, what? What am I missing? What? It should be free. Free. Does it need a little persuasion too? I don't know. Let's see. Alright, what am I missing? What's catching here? So there's like a lip on that? Oh, there's like a lip. Well, how does that work if there's a lip? Okay, this is spinning freely. Can't tell if it's just worn a lip, a groove that's stuck in, but I might have to do a little research before I just yank this off. But anyway, what I want to do, I want to take these backing plates off and clean them up before I go further. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is see if we can go ahead and get the other side to this point. And I might have to do a little research about this before I just don't want to do any damage. So that's where we're heading. Okay, so on this other end here, we got pretty much the same scenario. We're going to go about it the same way, which is to say half-ass. But anyway, a couple differences here. We've got this fancy schmancy custom wire cotter pin here. So that's a little different. No big deal. Just how they did things. We'll get past it. Then maybe you can or can't see this, but this stud here is much shorter than the rest. So that one's broke off basically. So what I'm going to try to do is to, when I go to put the, I'll put 4 lug nuts on with my tool that I made, my brake rotor tool. And when I go to put this on, I will try to compensate, so like I'll spread the jaws around this one here, because since the tool's not going to be pulling as evenly, so hopefully we can work around that. So as you can see, there is no rhyme or reason to these old cars. This side came off, backing plate and all. Whoop! Nice and easy. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to guess, since this is nice and wet, the seal's leaking. I know eventually I'm probably going to have to put new seals in this, but for now I'm not going to do that. So, in general, my rotor tool worked just fine. Here's my key, my cotter, my key for my axle way. I gotta keep that. Now, see if we can't separate this backing plate. Stuff is rolling around in there loose. Those are the bolts from the back, so hopefully my splash shield will stay in position until I can see where it's at. Isn't this fun? I don't know which part's worse. Alright, let's just start jamming stuff in here so it can't keep closing on me. There's got to be a better way. I'm tired of wrestling this football. Alright. We need some more wedges. Yeah, what the heck, let's just tear up all my wire brushes. This one's got a nice little wedge shape to it. We'll see what happens here. Come on, go kaboing. This is so much fun! We're getting there slowly. Oh, we got an even gap all the way around though. That's important. Now things are happening. Oh, come on. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yay! Finally. Alright. So it looks like the roundy part of this shield goes opposite of the wheel cylinder. This one's a lot more rusty inside. Again, still a fair amount of meat on these pads, but I don't know if that can be saved or not. We'll see. This also tells us that my backing plate should just slide right off, because that came right off. So let's go down on the other end and see what we can do there to get that backing plate off. So I think to get this off, I just need to be a little less gentle. A little more persuasion. Look at that. All right. We've got the drums off. We got the backing plates off. Next thing we got to do is bag and tag all these loose parts so we don't lose them. Take everything off these backing pads, strip them so I can paint them. Then yeah, I'm ready to start assembling this rear end. So I didn't actually, no, that's not right. I did actually start working on the brakes, but that went into a whole nother project, and I decided I'm just going to make it a separate video. I still had a lot of work to do to get ready to start assembling my rear axle, my front axle. I wasn't ready to start. The bottom line is it was just taking a lot more time for all the little sub-assemblies to get this thing to be a roller than I had anticipated. And I overestimated my ability, underestimated the time, yada, yada, yada. That happens, you know. Frustration things like how when I was taking apart the rear axle, how one side had completely different problems than the other, and it took me forever to get it apart. I did start digging into those brakes, and there's more involved than I thought there was going to be. I am still going to try to save the original parts, rebuild the wheel cylinders, etc. I just decided that's going to have to be a whole nother video, so I'm not going to include the tearing apart of the brakes here. As you saw, the last thing I did was paint my front axle, and then I laid out all of my parts to where I can start trying to think about putting it together. Well, as you can see, you know, the work wasn't a total loss. I'm kind of set up here now to start putting things together. Got everything laid out. I still have a lot of other work to do to get to some of the assemblies, but in general, I can now start proceeding with trying to make my frame a roller. So in the end, if you watched it this long, thank you, appreciate it. I decided to go ahead and make a video out of this and not kind of sugarcoat it, because, you know, when you're doing this for real, unless you're a professional and you're going to make mistakes, things are going to take you longer, things are going to cost more, you're going to need stuff that you don't have, etc., etc. That's just going to happen. I just feel that's part of the hobby that most of the YouTube channels out there that are big don't show. They skip over a lot of that frustration and things, especially, you know, if they already know how to handle it. It took me a while to figure out how to get that one drum and backing plate separated, how to get the backing plate off, just because I was worried about damaging parts and I didn't want to just wail on it. So anyway, next time I will be looking at either rebuilding brakes or assembling an axle or assembling my front axle. I don't know yet what the next video is. I'm probably going to break it down into 3-4 videos now, rather than try to just go from this pile of parts to a rolling chassis. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll stick with me on this. Throw a comment what you think. If I don't know, you got any pointers, I need them. So until the next video, later YouTube.